Healing is not a destination, but a continuous journey that requires patience, courage, and self-compassion.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lenny. Imagine running a full-on motivational YouTube channel, daily uploads, inspiring messages, powerful voiceovers, and you don't have to lift a finger after setup. In this video, I'm going to show you how I built an AI agent that does exactly that. So from generating motivational quotes to visuals to adding voiceovers and even uploading to YouTube. This AI does it all. So whether you're a content creator or you're just curious about AI automation, you're going to love what's possible. Let's get started. So first things first, I'm going to walk you through exactly how this flow works. This flow starts with a Google Sheets trigger, and I did create a Google Sheets here, and I called it Motivational Coach. You can call it n8n. And I just have one column in here, which I call Topics, and I do have 2 topics in here. So that's my Google Sheets trigger right there. The next part of my workflow is where I generate the motivational quotes. So the motivational quotes is going to be based on the topics I have in my motivation quotes sheet. And then once my motivation quotes are generated, I pass it to ElevenLabs to generate the voiceover. And once the voiceover is generated, I also generate the captions file, which will now be my subtitle, which I would eventually use in my videos. The next part of my workflow has to do with getting the music as well as getting the images. So from my last tutorial, I did have a comment that came to about what if you want to work in Google Drive? What if you don't want to be using AI to generate the music and also using AI to generate the images? So I decided to demo the parts where you'd have your own music and you have your own videos. So I did get 3 copyright videos from the internet. So if you want copyright free videos, you could get them on pixels.com. So I got my copyright free video, and I also have my copyright free audio as well. So I have them in my Google Drive folder. So this is where I combine all the music, the videos, the voiceovers, as well as the subtitle to create one video, which I would intend post on YouTube. So that's really the workflow in a nutshell. So now that I've talked about the workflow, let's start building. I'm gonna come in here and then I'm gonna pre-concrete workflow. Like I mentioned earlier on in my other videos, every workflow would have a first step. And since we are using Google Sheets Trader, that's gonna be the first step. So I'm gonna come in here and look for Sheets. And when I click on the Google Sheets Trader, I'm gonna select Unroll, Added, or Updated. So before you start this workflow, just make sure that you already do have your Google Sheets API set up, and make sure that it has the ability to access your Google Sheets as well. So once you open the node, you would have to select the document you're looking for. So in this case, it's going to be my motivation quotes. And then from the list, I'm also going to select Sheet 1. And then at this point, I'm not going to be adding anything. If I should test this particular step, you'd see that I would have 2 rows in here for me, which exactly reflects the 2 rows I have in here. So now moving on. So now that this part of my workflow works, next part of my workflow is really to make sure that I am just selecting the last row that has been added to my spreadsheet. So in order to do so, I'm going to be using a code node. So a code node is what you would use to typically write code or functions you may have. And for the code, I'm going to be using this exact code in here. So the default code is pulling everything. So what I want to do is just pull the last row that has been added. Okay. And don't worry about this exact code. Like I mentioned, I have the JSON file, which I'm giving away for free. I'm going to link it in this tutorial so that you can grab it. And then when I test this right now, you'd realize that I only have 1 row left. So that's good. That's working fine. Now moving on. So now that I have the exact rule I'm looking for, the next step for me is to use my agent to generate the motivational quotes dynamically. So if I click on this right now and I select the advanced AI agent, I'm just going to select this AI agent here. And then for the agent, I'm going to use the tools agent. And instead of using the connector chat trigger node, I'm going to say define below. And then I'm going to draw this in here, the topics in here. Okay. And then in terms terms of the options, I'm going to include a system message. And this is exactly the prompt I'm going to be using. And all these things are things you could modify. If you don't want the exact prompt I'm using, you could modify them as well once you get a template, okay? This is the prompt I'm using. You are a helpful assistant that generates one paragraph of motivational quotes based on this input. I don't want to see emojis. I don't want to see non-English characters in the text. I only want to see the motivational quotes and the text in the output. I also don't want to see any leading sentences, symbols, and make sure you remove asterisks. The reason why I'm being specific is that with AI, if you are not really specific, it can go on and do its own thing. So now we need to attach a chat model. And for the chat model, I'm going to be using OpenAI chat model. And again, I'm going to be using GPT-4 or Mini. It really depends on the chat model you want to use. There are so many different models you can use. Some of them are more expensive than the others. So really, I just want to use this one, okay? And then in terms of the properties, I'm just going to define the response format, and I just want it to be text. It can either be text or JSON. I just want it to be text. So I'm just going to go back. And then once I have my chat model defined, the next thing I want to define is the memory. So in terms of the memory, I'm going to go with the default window buffer memory, which is the easiest to configure. And in terms of the session ID, I'm going to say define below, and I'm going to drag the topics in here. And I'm going to go back. So we have this set up nicely for us. There's not much we have to do at this point. If I should come in here and I should test this right now, you'd realize that I would have the motivational post as an output for me, and it's also in text format, and I want this to be automated. So that is also why I'm taking out any symbol, any emojis and all that, okay, to make sure that the viewer has a great experience. All right, so now that that has been done, the next part of my workflow is where I go into ElevenLabs, and this is where I pass my text into ElevenLabs text-to-speech model. So if you don't have an ElevenLabs account, I'd encourage you to create one. Hey, they do have like a general free version which you can use, and for this tutorial, I'm also going to be using the free version as well. When you come into ElevenLabs, you want to go into the API documentation, okay? And so first of all, you need your API keys, and I'm going to go into the API documentation. So if I come into the API documentation, you just have to navigate to the text-to-speech, and it would give you the things you need to do for your text-to-speech. Okay, so I'm going to click on API reference. If I do text-to-speech, which is create speech, it would give you the code you need, okay? So for text-to-speech, what you need is the voice ID, and I also need the API key as well. Those things are there. Compose you once, as well as the text. We already have our text. All we need right now is the API key and the voice ID. And I'm going to show you exactly how you could get your API keys, okay? When you come into your ElevenLabs portal, you just click on this one and you select on API keys, and then it brings you to this page, and then you can just create API key, okay? And then you just create it and then copy it. And Bumabin needs this, so don't worry about that. Okay, so you copy your API key and then you paste it in your workflow. So I'm going to come back into the API reference documentation, and then I'm going to copy this color code, and I'll go back into my workflow, click on this plus button, and then select the HTTP node. And then in here, I'm going to click on import code, and then I'm going to paste the code in here. It would have all the default stuff in there. So I'm going to paste my API key in my workflow here. And then in terms of the text, I'm going to drive the output I got from my previous steps into here as a text. And in terms of the voice ID, there's already a default voice ID, which I'm going to keep. I'm not going to change the default voice ID. I'm just going to be adding the response format, okay? Because I want this to be in the file format, I'm going to add an option here and say the response format should be in a file format, okay? And in terms of the name, I'm probably going to call it, let's say, speech file, so that it's easy to recognize for me, okay? And if I should test the step right now, you would see that I'd have the audio file generated for me. Okay, so the speech file has been generated, so that's good. Everything is working fine, so that's great. Okay, so now that we have a speech file generated, the next step for us is to write this to disk, okay? Because we'll be using FFmpeg, so we want to make sure that we write this to disk. And to do this, we are going to use the write file node, and we're going to click on this and select on write file to disk. In terms of the location, we're just going to be storing this in a temp folder, and we're going to be storing it as speech file new.mpga. So that is what we are going to be using. Okay, so this is how it would look like. And in terms of the input binary field, we're going to use the name we gave to our file, which was the speech file new. So that is what I'm going to be here. And yeah, so this is fine. This works fine now. If I should test the step, you would realize that it's been written to disk for us. So it's now synced nicely for us in the name we want in the format as well. So that is good. So up until now, we've been able to generate our code. We've been able to generate the speech file, which is going to be used as our voiceover. So that works really well for us right now. Now, the next step is really where we generate our captions, okay? And to generate our captions, we first want to read our file from this. So we are going to read our file from this. So this is the file we sort of just created, and this is the location. So this is exactly what we want. Okay, so now that we verify from this, the next step for us is to transcribe the voiceover we just created. Okay, so I'm just gonna come in here and I'm gonna use the HTTP node as well. And really this time around, instead of using the create speech, what I'm gonna be using is I'm gonna be using the create transcript. Okay, so I'm gonna come in here, select create transcript and click on the copy. Once I copy this, I'm gonna come in here and click on import call, and then I'm gonna import. Okay, so this has been imported nicely for us. In here, we have to enter our API key. So again, I'm going to copy our API key, which we generated earlier on, and I'm going to paste it in this workflow here. And then in terms of the model ID, if you come into the API reference documentation, there's only two model IDs here, so which is describe v1 and describe v1 experimental. So I'm just going to use the describe v1 in here. And then in terms of the binary file name, we called it speech file. So that's exactly what we're going to be using, okay? In terms of the binary file name, we're going to be using beta. So that's the name of the file that was generated after we read it from disk. So we're going to be using beta. And then there are some other important additional parameters that we need to add. Because we want to basically have an SLT file, this will default to generating a text file for us. So we want to generate an SLT file. And in order to do that, if you come into the documentation, if you want to generate additional formats that's like SRT, you need to add in another field called additional formats, and then you need to pass in the parameter code format. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to add additional formats in here, and then in terms of the value, I'm going to be using this value in here based on the API reference documentation. The other things we also want to add, we want to also add timestamps as well, and all these input fields that we are adding from the API reference documentation. I would advise that you spend some time reviewing the documentation because there's a lot of things that you can do in there. And then we're also going to add an additional field. So if you come into this API reference documentation, it's also asking you to add this field, whether you want to annotate which speaker is currently talking in that builder file. So we're about to add this field, which is a very important field to add. It defaults to false, so we just want to make sure that it's true. So we're adding this field in here, and we're going to put the value as true. So that's it for now. We don't need to do much at this point. If I should test this step, you'd see that would have SLC file generated. So as you can see, if I should change this to a schema, as you can see, our SLT file has been generated for us and it's in here as content. So that is good. So the next step for us is we really just want to make sure that you're just extracting the SLT file. So in doing so, we just want to store that SLT file that was generated in the set field. So in order to do so, they're going to search for a set, and then in here, you're just going to drag their content in here. Okay, so we're going to add a manual field, and for the manual field we're going to call it captions, and then we're going to drag the contents in here. I'm going to scroll down. Okay, I'm going to scroll down, and then I'm going to drag this object in here, and I'm going to change this from a string to an object because it's really an object. Okay, if I should test this right now, just so you have an idea, you'd know what I mean or what I just did. So I'm just going to click on test workflow, and you'd see what we get as an output. Okay, so this is how the output looks like. As you can see, we have our captions object in here, and it's in an SLT format, and this is the data we have in here. So that's good, okay? Now, moving on to the next step. So at this point, we have everything in the field, okay? But we just want to make sure that we're extracting the exact SLC format we want. So this is what we are going to do. We're going to include another code. So we're going to click on the code here. And then in the code, we're going to be using this code, okay, just to make sure that it's just returning that part of the captions that we need. Because right now it's in an array and everything. So we just want to make sure that it's stored as a file so that we can write it to disk. Okay, so this is the code we're going to be using. And don't worry, like I mentioned, I'm going to be dropping this whole JSON file to free so you can try it out yourself. I'm going to test this step right now. I suspect it's probably going to ask me to run the full workflow. Now let's see. Okay, so I need to run the full workflow. So I'm just going to test this full workflow to see what we have right now. Okay, so this is run. Now this is the output we have. So as you can see, we have our array looking captions now in a data file, which is good. So that's fine. Okay, so that has been done. The next step is to just really write this to file. So we're going to write this as well to file, and we're going to be using the right node for it. Click on this, and we're going to store it in the same location that we had the other stored initially. So we're going to store it in here, and then in terms of good binary field name, we're going to use data because that's the name from the previous workflow that we have. So this will be written to disk for us. This part of the flow is done. Now moving on to the next part of the flow, which hopefully would be a lot more quicker than this part of it. Okay, so the next part of our flow is really where we get our music and we get our audio file. So to do so, I'm going to add in another workflow here, and I'm going to connect it to my Google Drive, okay? And in my Google Drive, really all I want to do is I just want to download a file. Okay? I want to download a file I have in there. I'm going to use the download node, and in the download node is the exact configuration I'm going to be using. So I'm going to be using by URL. So I'm going to click on by URL, and then I'm going to go into my video folder, and then I'm going to copy the URL to the particular video I'm referencing. And this is why I said that just make sure that your settings does not restrict people from accessing this file. It should allow anyone on the internet with a link to view this. So we're gonna copy this in here, and when I should test the step right now, you realize that the file will be available for me. And now that I have the file available, the next step for me is to write it to disk. Okay, so I want to write this file to disk. So I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna click on the right node, and then I'm just gonna write this to disk. So I'm gonna store it in my disk, and then I'm gonna call it video.mp4. Okay, and I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna do the same thing. Now that we are done with this part of the flow, the next step for me is to generate or grab the music and the video files we have in our Google Drive folder. So in order to do so, I'm gonna time into my trigger, click on this node here, and then I'm gonna select Google Drive, okay? And in Google Drive, I wanna download the file. So in order to download the file, I wanna download it by URL, and I'm gonna come into my video folder, and then I'm gonna click, and then I'm gonna copy link. Make sure that you are not restricting this to anyone. Make sure that everybody has access, otherwise it's not gonna work. Okay, this is a very important piece of the entire one flow to it. So if I should test this step right now, you'd see that has been downloaded for me. So these are the two files we have, and then once I have the file downloaded, I'm just gonna write it to disk so that I can leverage the ffmpeg command to work on it. So if I come in here, I'm gonna use the write to disk node. I'm gonna select this write file to disk. And then again, in terms of, I'm just gonna name it, let's say video. I'm gonna name it as a video file. And I'm gonna store it in the same folder as the others have been stored. And then, yeah. And the next step would be for me to do the same thing for my music file. So again, I'm gonna come in here, use a Google Drive node, and I'm gonna download the file, and I'm gonna download by URL. And in this case, I'm gonna be using the URL from my audio file I have in Google Drive. The same thing about permissions. Make sure that anyone with link can view this file. If I should test this right now, you'd see that the file has been downloaded for me as well. Okay, so moving on. So once we have our file ready, the next step is to add in another node. I'm just gonna stop this workflow for now. Once we have our file in here, as you can see, our file has been generated for us. And the next step for us is to write this file as well to disk. So I'm gonna write this to disk, and I'm gonna be using the write file to disk node. I'm gonna store this exactly where the other files have been stored, which is a temp folder. And in terms of the name, I'm going to be calling it, let's say, music file, okay? So I'm going to call it music file. So it's easy to recognize, okay? So I have this here. I also have this here, lady. So this is good to go. The next thing is I usually like to trim my videos. I just want to keep it as 30 seconds for the purposes of this tutorial. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim the audio. So I'm going to come into my audio file node. And then I'm just really going to add in an execute command node. And in here, I'm going to put in the command, which is really this command here. This means overwrite existing file. And in this particular directory, so there's a file in this directory called minute music file, overwrite it and keep it to 30 seconds and call it audio.mpp. So that's great. This would just string the audio for us. And then moving on. So we have our video file generated. We have our audio file generated. Our FFM command that combines the voiceovers and everything would only combine just like one audio file input, okay? So what we want to do is we're going to combine our audio file with our voiceover file. And this is where our voiceover was generated from. And this is where we wrote it to disk. So we are going to add an execute node in here. And this execute node, really, what we want to do in here is we just want to combine those two files, okay? The two files that we have. So this is a command we are going to be using for that. And like I said, you would have access to the JSON file, so don't worry if you cannot see the commands here. And yeah, so I'm going to drag the output from this into this, and then we have our two audio files combined. Okay, so we have our two audio files combined. The next step is we want to also write that to disk. So we come in here, you use the write file node, and then we select on write file to disk. We'll probably call it merged audio. Okay, we're gonna come in here and we're gonna store in a temp folder. And again, we're gonna be using data, and we come in here. Now we know that our file has been written to disk for us. Now the final step, well, maybe the final step, the parts where all the magic happens, right? Where you combine all the videos. And to do so, we are using the execute node. I'm going to click on this plus button and I'm going to use the execute node. And in the execute node, what I'm really going to be using is I'm going to be using this command. And don't worry, again, you'll have access to this command in the JSON file as well. And just make sure that you drag all the nodes into this, okay? The outputs, all the various outputs we have. So we want to see 3 different lines coming into this execute command, because you are combining all the 3 different mega files that was created. And then the next step is you're going to add a read file node. And at this point, after I add a read file node, would output everything so that you have an idea of what we have, okay? So we want to use the read file node from our execute command. We really wanted to call the output video that is generated test output.mp4. So I'm going to come in here and say just read any file you see at testoutput.mp4. Now at this point, I believe we are in a good position to run the entire workflow. Okay, so let's see what our output looks like. Okay, so it looks like it's being created for us. Let's see. Okay, so this is good. So now that we have everything generated for us, the next step for us is to post into YouTube. And on YouTube, you can use the YouTube node. I just prefer to use the HTTP node. In the HTTP node here, we really want to use a post. And also make sure that if you included YouTube in your scope as well when creating your API's keys and defining like the access it has. And in terms of the URL, this is usually the URL you need to have if you want to post into YouTube. In terms of authentication, we're going to go with a predefined credential type. And then in terms of the credential type, we are using the YouTube Auth2 API. And I'm going to be using YouTube account 2. And we're going to be sending the body. And in terms of the fields we're going to be using, we need an n8n binary file. So if I come into body content type, we're going to be using n8n in the input data field main. We're going to be using beta. And yeah, that's it. You can define other parameters as well in the body. You can define like what the title should be and all that. And at this point, we've defined everything nicely. So what we're going to do is we're going to run the entire workflow to see how it looks like for us. So I'm going to click on test workflow. Okay, so this has been posted on YouTube. As you can see, it's saying that it's been posted on YouTube. And because we didn't pass the title in the parameters, it's gonna come on YouTube as unknown. If I come into this channel that I created in here specifically for it, you'd see that it's been posted in here. So let's come into the content. And as you can see, it's being posted on here. It defaults to public. You need to set all those parameters. So I'm just going to change it to unlisted. And if I should play this right now, this is how the output looks like, okay? Gonna play this.
Healing is not a destination, but a continuous journey that requires patience, courage, and self-compassion. Embrace each moment as an opportunity to learn.
Okay, so that is it for today's tutorial. If you enjoyed this tutorial, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Leave your comments in the comment section below. Share, subscribe, all that good stuff. I also do have other videos, other AI automation videos that I have done. I'm gonna leave them on the screen as well so that I can check them out. But for now, thank you for watching and see you in the next one.
To release and to transform your pain into power. Remember that even the most difficult paths can lead to profound growth and renewal. So be gentle with yourself as you navigate this sacred process. Trust in your ability to heal